A garbage container in an industrial area on the outskirts of Dubai was opened early in the morning on June 19, 2024. The garbage truck driver, a 40-year-old employee of a contracting company, stopped at a row of metal bins on a street between warehouses in the Al Quoz area. One of the containers was not completely closed. The lid was resting against the corner edge, and fresh brown stains were visible on the asphalt nearby. When he tried to tip the container into the receiving hopper, he felt resistance, as if there was a heavy, immovable object inside. He lifted the lid with his hands and saw thick plastic bags wrapped in gray tape. One bag was torn, and through the tear, he could see a woman's hand with red nail polish. He took a few steps back, called his immediate supervisor and the emergency services. The Dubai police arrived within 30 minutes. The area was cordoned off, and the container was not touched until the forensic team arrived. In the first few hours, officials did not comment. Video recordings from the patrol officers' body cameras, later analyzed by investigators, show the sequence of events, measuring the level of the container's contents, examining the protruding tape, recording traces of drips on the outer wall, and calling for forensic laboratory personnel. When the bags were opened, the body of a young woman was found. An examination of the upper layers of the packaging revealed multiple deep cuts on the forearms and thighs, a longitudinal incision on the torso, and the chest was partially opened. The heart was missing. Police officers immediately pointed to the degree of post-mortem interference, which was unusual for domestic murders. Representatives of the Emirates Prosecutor's Office were called to the scene, and the consular services of neighboring countries were notified in accordance with the established procedure for dealing with unidentified foreign citizens. The initial investigation began with identification. Fingerprints of sufficient quality were preserved on the fingers of her left hand. A comparison with the database of registered entries into the United Arab Emirates over the previous 30 days showed a match with the data of a passenger who crossed the border on June 9th, arriving on a regular flight from Almaty. Her name is Arujan Temirova, 23 years old, a citizen of the Republic of Kazakhstan. At the time of entry, she stated the purpose of her trip as tourism. In the border control footage, she is wearing a light jacket and jeans, carrying a small suitcase and a backpack. Her phone, found among her belongings at the airport, contained the contact details of relatives and photography studio accounts. In the first 24 hours after the body was discovered, investigators requested data from mobile phone operators for her number, as well as CCTV footage from the arrivals area and adjacent taxi ranks. An official police statement was released in the evening of the same day. It stated that the body of a woman, probably a foreign citizen, had been found, that identification was underway, that all versions were being considered, and that it was too early to disclose any details. The name and nationality were not made public. At the same time, reports began to spread on social media in Kazakhstan about the disappearance of a girl with the same name who had stopped communicating on the 10th day of her stay in Dubai. Relatives wrote that contact had been lost, her geolocation had stopped updating, and the last message had been sent the day before, in which she said that everything was going according to plan, and that she was going to a meeting with agency representatives. The formal stage of securing evidence at the site where the body was found took several hours. Forensic experts examined the packaging, 2 outer construction-type bags, an inner wrapping of plastic film, and several layers of adhesive tape. A partial thumbprint was found on the inside of the tape. It was suitable for comparative analysis. One of the outer bags had a sticker with an item number and barcode identifying the factory batch. This was the key to requesting purchase data from chain stores in Dubai. Investigators requested bank transaction records for the past 2 weeks for all retail outlets that sold bags and tape of this series. CCTV cameras at a store in the Business Bay area captured a man of average height, wearing a black t-shirt and a cap covering his forehead, who purchased a similar set of consumables late in the evening on June 15th. He paid with a foreign bank card. not a local one. The card was virtual, linked to a payment service account registered to a company with an address in a European jurisdiction. It was later discovered that the account had been created using the passport details of a person with an Arabic name and a date of birth corresponding to 1946. At this stage, the surname was not disclosed, the data was partially hidden, and requests were sent through diplomatic channels. At the same time, the investigation team traced Arujan Temirova's movements from the moment she arrived. Taxi service data showed a trip from the airport to a residential complex in the Dubai Marina area. The apartment number was listed as a serviced apartment, booked through a short-term rental platform for 1 month. The booking was made using an account with a nickname that did not match the girl's name, but the payment was made using her card. Upon check-in, the administrator said that the key had been given to a man who identified himself as a representative of the agency. He presented a printed power of attorney in English, signed and stamped by an organization with no legal address. The administrator photographed the power of attorney for internal records and allowed the previous guest to be evicted a day early to vacate the apartment. A copy of the document was handed over to the police. The stamp appeared to be homemade. The font did not match the standard font used for stamps in the United Arab Emirates, and the name of the organization was too general and did not include a registration number. This allowed the document to be classified as fake. The electronic key entry log showed that the card was activated on the day of check-in, June 12th, and was used several times a day thereafter. Cameras in the lobby of the complex captured a girl accompanied by an older man with a short haircut, wearing a short-sleeved shirt. They entered together and left separately. In one frame, the man is carrying 2 paper bags from a supermarket, and the girl is walking with a phone. In the first days after the body was found, 2 teams worked in parallel. One worked with Arujan Temirova's circle in Kazakhstan. They questioned her parents, friends, and colleagues from photo shoots. They found out that a month before the trip, she had received an offer from someone who introduced himself as a coordinator for an international modeling agency, allegedly recruiting girls from Central Asia for advertising campaigns in the Persian Gulf countries. The offer came in a private message on social media. At first, the communication was in Russian, then switched to English. The person sent a list of requirements, offered to pay for the flight, accommodation, and daily expenses, and promised to organize 2 photo shoots with advance payments. After a week, the correspondence became less formal. Compliments, dinner invitations, and offers to walk along the embankment after work appeared in the messages. One of her friends said that Arujan perceived the coordinator as someone who could become not only an employer, but also a potential partner. She wrote that he was attentive, that he seemed to see more in her than just a model. Her friend's words were later confirmed. Arujan's phone, retrieved from a digital copy of a cloud backup, contained voice messages from a man with a low voice where he called her by name, asked about her health, and promised a separate contract and personal terms. All of this material was included in the evidence. A second team of investigators studied the city's CCTV network along the routes connecting the residential complex in Dubai Marina, hotels in the business districts, and the Al Quoz industrial zone. On the night of June 16th, a traffic camera recorded a dark-colored sedan leaving the underground parking lot of a high-rise building in Business Bay. Traces of a recent cleaning were later found on the interior panel of the car's trunk. Chemical compounds, characteristic of removing biological contaminants. That same night, a camera at a warehouse in Al Quoz captured the same car stopping near a row of containers, a hooded man getting out of the vehicle, and the back seat folded down. He took 2 large bags out of the trunk, dragged them to the container, lifted the lid, tried to throw them in, but left 1 bag by the side wall. There were noticeable stains on his sneakers. He looked around, closed the trunk, and drove away. The video showed that the car's license plate was partially covered with dirt, but 2 letters and 2 numbers were recognizable. This narrowed down the list of possible license plates in the car rental databases. On the morning of June 17th, investigators questioned employees of the rental company that serviced this range of license plates. A man with a Jordanian passport rented the car, and the contract was signed for 10 days. The contract listed his address as a penthouse in a high-rise complex near the canal in Business Bay. The reception confirmed that the guest had checked in 10 days earlier, often returned late at night, sometimes brought large bags, and used the delivery service. When asked if women accompanied him, the employee replied that he had seen a young woman of Asian appearance several times with short blonde hair and above-average height. This testimony was cross-referenced with footage from the lobby of the Dubai Marina complex. The match in body type and hair color was obvious. While the interviews were ongoing, digital forensics experts examined the electronic traces of the agency through which Arujan Temirova received the invitation. The website domain was registered to a private individual, not a company. The domain had a short history. The website was created a few weeks before the correspondence, and its content was generic, consisting of several photos taken from open sources, texts without legal information, and no office address or license number. Email addresses from the domain forward messages to a regular free service. In the correspondence provided by her parents and friends, the coordinator used anonymous signatures. Agency manager, filming coordinator, without last names. Some emails included English language contracts with only a few points and no details about the other party. The signatures were scanned, and there were no stamps. This pointed to a pre-planned scheme designed to gain trust and avoid legal checks. The investigation established that after her arrival, Arujan Temirova spent her first night in a serviced apartment in Dubai Marina and met with a representative of the agency at a cafe on the waterfront the next day. Camera footage confirms their presence at a table. He appears confident, and she smiles, leafing through a portfolio on a tablet. He paid with a bank card, linked to the same payment service used to purchase the bags and tape. That evening, she sent her parents a voice message saying that everything was going according to plan, that she had been promised a fitting and test shoot the next day, and asking them not to worry. The next day, they met again, this time in the business district. In the parking lot of a high-rise complex, he suggested they go up to check out the location for the shoot. The cameras then show them entering the elevator together. After that, Arujan does not appear on the recording. The man leaves the penthouse several times and returns with bags. Over the next 2 days, the building's internal systems recorded heavy water and electricity consumption at night, and the girl's phone signal was registered in the area once before going dead. The investigation team checked the facts, saving time on technical details. Taxi services provided logs. In the days after moving into the penthouse, the man made short trips between the house, the supermarket, and a hardware store. The total cost of the purchases, as indicated by the receipts, was within the normal range for household items, with nothing unusual at first glance. However, among the items were rolls of adhesive tape, construction bags, and a large kitchen knife. This combination attracted attention. The following week, an operation was planned to arrest the suspect at the residential complex. However, by the time the task force arrived, the room was empty. According to security, the guest had left early in the morning on June 18th, left his electronic keys at the front desk, paid for cleaning in cash, and left in an unknown direction. Parking cameras recorded him getting into another rented car, a compact white vehicle. The license plate number of this car was not disclosed for reasons of operational secrecy. However, it is known that, according to the company's records, it was rented for 3 days by another person registered with a passport from another Middle Eastern country. This suggested the existence of a network of acquaintances and front men willing to provide their documents for a short period. The facts gathered at this point formed a sequence: an invitation from a fictitious agency, check-in at an apartment, communication shifting to a private setting, relocation to a penthouse in a business district, abrupt cessation of communication, purchase of consumables, and an attempt to dispose of the body in an industrial area. The circumstances pointed to a premeditated plan that combined elements of a labor recruitment offer and personal intimacy. Relatives in Kazakhstan emphasized in their testimony that Arajan wasn't prone to risky relationships, but could have perceived the attention of an older man as support in a new country. Her friends said that she believed she would get an official contract and hoped to stay. Neighbors at Marina's apartment in Dubai recalled hearing laughter in the hallway in the morning, followed by the sound of an elevator door closing. They did not hear any screams or sounds of a struggle. The key question remained the identification of the man with the Jordanian passport, his fundamental role in his relationship with Arajan Temirova, and verification of his possible involvement in other similar incidents. Through international cooperation, criminal cases involving human trafficking and sexual exploitation in several countries were brought to light. One of the files, compiled several years ago, mentioned a man with the same year of birth and citizenship who was accused of involving women in prostitution under the guise of modeling work. The court did not bring the case to trial at that time, and the defendant was released on bail and left the country. Information in this file was requested again. The name was not disclosed in our materials at this stage. The legal services of the United Arab Emirates traditionally comment only to a limited extent on cases before the investigation is complete, and this practice was maintained. One of the most time-consuming tasks was analyzing digital traces in the penthouse. A team of crime scene investigators, accompanied by a prosecutor, searched. The apartment looked clean, with standard furniture in the living room and bedroom, and no signs of disorder in the kitchen. However, fluorescent reagents revealed multiple traces of biological fluids on the bathroom floor and shower wall. Tiny fragments of fabric and hair follicles were found at the tile joints. Particles were found in the sewer trap, which the laboratory later identified as microparticles of human blood. An area on the carpet in the bedroom was found to have been treated with a cleaning agent, with altered fluorescence under ultraviolet light. This indicated attempts to remove traces locally. In the kitchen trash can, they found the packaging from a long-bladed knife purchased 2 days before the incident. They also found a receipt from a hardware store with a purchase time that matched the camera recording. On the table in the living room was a business card for a supposed modeling coordinator with a phone number and email address, but no address. The phone was prepaid with a short service life, activated shortly before the meeting at the cafe, and turned off the night before the trip to the industrial area. An examination of her finances revealed additional connections. Small amounts were transferred from various e-wallets to the account used to pay for the apartment and car rentals. The sources of these funds trace back to intermediaries in several countries. The amounts were split up to avoid automatic bank monitoring filters. At one stage, money came from a wallet that had previously appeared in an investigation into the recruitment of women for hostess work in Southeast Asian countries. This indirectly confirmed that the case was not a one-off improvisation, but part of a scheme in which romantic promises and professional prospects are used to control the victim. In Kazakhstan, in Arajan's parents' apartment, investigators spoke with her mother. She showed them childhood photos, a diploma from a makeup artist course, and publications featuring her in local photo shoots. The mother said that her daughter had been preparing for the trip for 6 months, saving money for her portfolio, updating her resume, and studying English. A few weeks before departure, she received several invitations to auditions in Dubai. She chose the agency option because they promised to pay for her flight and accommodation and sent her a schedule and a list of stylists on set. Her mother asked her to be careful, but admitted that she was proud of her determination. They agreed to keep in touch every day. When the messages stopped, they initially thought it was because she was busy. On the 3rd day without news, they started calling. The phone was available, but the calls were not answered. On the 5th day, They contacted the Kazakh consulate in the United Arab Emirates, where they were advised to file a report with the Dubai police and the immigration service. A day after the report was filed, investigators were already reviewing airport surveillance footage. Colleagues who had worked with her on temporary assignments in Almaty recalled that Arujan was disciplined, arrived on time, watched her diet, and did not engage in late-night activities. Some said that she idealized offers from abroad, but did not seem naive. There are no clear signs in her correspondence that she was aware of the risks. On the contrary, the tone of her voice messages was confident. She believed that she was in control of the situation. This belief is common in many similar cases described in reports by international organizations fighting human trafficking. People hoping for a new career often underestimate the organization of those who use the labor market and personal relationships as tools of control. In Dubai, investigators checked all the places where the suspect could have taken women. Rooms in an apartment hotel in the marina, where he had rented accommodation on previous visits, a co-working office, where he had rented a desk for a month, and a yacht club, where he had booked guest passes. Administrators noted that he always behaved calmly, provided documents, did not linger, and did not engage in conflicts. Security staff at one apartment hotel recalled an incident when a girl came down to the reception desk, spoke quietly, asked for a taxi, and looked confused. An employee offered to help, but the girl refused and left. Her face is not clear enough on the camera footage to establish her identity. The police requested information on all similar incidents over the past 6 months. Several incidents had similar descriptions. A young foreign woman leaving her room at night, asking for a car to be called, without giving any details. 2 days after the body was found, Arujan Temirova was officially identified. The procedure took place in the presence of a consulate representative. Her parents were unable to travel to Dubai, so the identification was carried out using photographs and genetic comparisons with samples taken from her mother. The forensic report recorded multiple stab wounds and the post-mortem removal of the heart. The wounds on the forearms were classified as possible defensive wounds. No traces of drugs were found in the blood. There were marks on the skin indicating contact with a rope around the wrists. All internal organs, except the heart, were intact. The report noted no signs of sexual assault. This did not rule out the question of motive, but it narrowed the range of possibilities. Before her trip, Arujan Temirova's life seemed typical for young people trying to break into the fashion industry. She was born in Almaty, studied at college, worked part-time as a makeup artist, participated in photo shoots for local brands, and built up a portfolio. Friends described her as hard-working, disciplined, and health-conscious. She was not well known, but had a steady presence on social media. Her page attracted the attention of agency accounts. Correspondence shows that she sent out her portfolio and received rare, visible responses. When an invitation arrived with payment for travel and accommodation, it looked like an opportunity. She was promised 2 advertising shoots for salon chains and clothing brands. The term was 2 weeks, with a possible extension. She agreed. From her first days in Dubai, her routine was typical: check into the apartment, lunch by the water, a walk through the shopping mall, a meeting in a cafe. The key difference was the shift in communication with the agency representative from a business format to a personal one. He paid her a lot of attention, complimented her, promised a personal contract, and said he saw great potential in her. He showed her photos from past events and mentioned the names of famous photographers he was referring to. These names later turned out to be real, but all the connections were references to other people's content on the internet. At one of the dinners, he ordered expensive dishes, paid the bill, and walked her back to the apartment. He didn't rush her or demand quick decisions. This made him seem like a confident man with resources. He said that everything should be dignified and that a girl needs conditions and respect. This set of phrases is found in the manuals of recruiters who combine job promises with personal relationships. By this time, the city continued to live its everyday life, but inside the complex in Business Bay, hidden activities were underway. The investigation received authorization to access elevator and corridor recordings. Specific movements were established. On the night of June 15th, the man left several times with bags and returned without them. The time difference between his departures corresponded to a trip to the nearest 24-hour store. On the morning of June 16th, he drove off in a rented car toward the industrial zone. In the evening of the same day, he returned on foot, leaving the vehicle in a different parking lot. The next day, he checked out of the hotel and left his keys. On the same day, the container with the body was still standing at the warehouse. It had not been emptied because the removal schedule for that line had been postponed due to road repairs. This accidental schedule change enabled the body to be discovered more quickly than in a typical scenario, where containers are taken to the landfill and their contents are mixed. Emirate prosecutors emphasized that the case had been given priority status. The Kazakh consulate officially requested oversight of the investigation and that the family be kept informed. Investigators had to respond cautiously to questions from the press. Initial news reports in the region referred only to the suspicious murder of a foreign woman. No names were mentioned. The name spread more quickly on social media in Kazakhstan, where specific dates, screenshots of correspondence, and photos from the embankment were already being discussed. These posts contained speculation, but some of the information coincided with the investigation. The date of departure, the fact that she had booked the apartment through a short-term rental platform, and correspondence with a person without a surname. This period of the investigation was characterized by painstaking, monotonous work. Investigators compared timings, checked receipts, retrieved parking records, and checked every incident involving a person matching the suspect's description. Employees of the Anti-Human Trafficking Department reminded their colleagues that such cases usually involve several episodes at the same time. Recruitment for work and the parallel creation of a romantic relationship, where the victim gradually falls into a circle of offers where personal boundaries are blurred. For Arujan Temirova, the turning point came when she was moved from the apartments under surveillance, which had a reception desk and cameras, to a private penthouse where access was restricted and where it was possible to act without witnesses. By the end of the second week after the body was discovered, investigators had formed a version of the routes, purchases, and actions. All that remained was to bring it to a level sufficient to issue an international arrest warrant. This required confirmation of the person's identity using a Jordanian passport, comparison of his biometrics with camera footage, and official responses to his previous cases. Separate work was carried out with flight databases. They checked whether he had left the country under his name, whether he had booked a flight using someone else's documents, or whether he had left via land borders. At the same time, his contacts in the emirate were investigated. Who rented him an apartment? Who drove him to shops? Who delivered food? These people may not have known what they were involved in, but they could provide details that were important for reconstructing events. The story began to take shape. A young woman from Kazakhstan, with specific career plans and a clear schedule, found herself in a situation where her job prospects became a reason to trust someone. In a foreign city, she met a man who, more than anyone else, told her how the local market worked, what to do, and what to avoid. He exuded confidence and resourcefulness, took charge of logistics, and offered more attention than a typical film coordinator would. He was both a guide and an object of personal attention. This dual status became central to the scenario, in which every step seemed like part of a natural process. Meeting, dinner, discussing the shooting location, traveling to the location, a quick look around, the promise of a contract. The correspondence confirmed that he consistently reduced her wariness, expanded her zone of trust, and involved her in decisions where she no longer required additional guarantees. At this point, The investigation had not yet named him, but specific details gathered from reports from previous years revealed familiar traits, previous suspicions of human trafficking, release on bail, disappearance from jurisdiction, change of countries, registration of domains for agencies without addresses. The Dubai police work closely with international partners, and these channels were fully utilized here. All that remained was to obtain formal confirmation, record the chain of electronic transactions, compare biometrics, and issue a legally valid wanted notice. Arujan Temirova's family was informed that the investigation was proceeding without delay, that every action was being documented, and that the next few days would be crucial for the publication of the wanted notices. By the morning of the next day, the investigation team had reconstructed the last 3 days before the disappearance on a large screen in the headquarters room. The diagram marked the following locations: a serviced apartment in Dubai Marina, a coffee shop on the waterfront, a multi-story complex near the canal in Business Bay, a 24-hour convenience store, and a parking lot near a warehouse in Al Quoz. The time intervals matched up without any gaps. Between the evening of June 15th and the early morning of June 17th, the man's movements, recorded by city cameras, matched the purchase receipts, data from store cameras, and parking lot logs down to the minute. This meant that the investigation's theories were based not on assumptions, but on mutually corroborating sources. The forensic laboratory reported its initial findings on the traces found on the adhesive tape. A partial thumbprint was found to be suitable for comparative analysis. It was compared with the fingerprints taken when the car was rented from the rental company, where the identification procedure requires the renter to place their finger on a tablet. The key characteristics matched. This did not automatically establish the identity of the person. Still, it gave reason to believe that the same person had purchased the supplies, used them for packaging, rented the car, and driven it to the industrial area. The knife that appeared in the purchases was identified by its model number. The knife packaging with the same item number was found in the apartment. No fingerprints were found on the blade, but microparticles corresponding to the tissue found in the shower drain were preserved on the inside of the packaging. The laboratory report was detailed, with a description of the methodology, as such connections are often disputed in court. A separate team analyzed digital traces from devices that could have been in the penthouse. The router's system log recorded Wi-Fi connections from several devices: a laptop with no apparent username, a smartphone running a standard operating system, and another smartphone whose activity coincided with Arujan Temirova's stay. This device connected once, updated its messengers, sent a short message, and disappeared. This single log confirmed that her phone was in the apartment for at least a short time. Among the router logs, there was another connection: a TV panel with screen mirroring mode activated. At such moments, documents, albums, and correspondence could be viewed on the screen. Remote access to the TV's content was impossible. Still, the timestamps helped build a timeline. On the evening of June 15th, when water and electricity were active, attempts were made to connect external media to the TV, then to connect to a streaming service, after which the data was interrupted. Immigration officials provided a reference. A man with a Jordanian passport who had rented a car and a penthouse entered the country a few days before Arujan Temirova's arrival. He arrived on a regular flight from another Gulf country, stating the purpose of his visit as business negotiations and his length of stay as 1 month. His travel history in the region showed regular short-term visits to neighboring countries and returns via major hubs. This is typical for entrepreneurs and those who operate in several jurisdictions at the same time. For investigators, such routes complicate matters. The more borders, the more legal procedures are required to obtain data. Nevertheless, requests were sent out. Copies of passenger manifests, airport camera recordings, and security checkpoint data were requested. At the same time, residential rentals were checked. The management company of the complex in Business Bay provided a register of access card entries and elevator videos. The time of Arujan Temirova's entry, recorded by cameras, coincided with the time when the penthouse card was activated for access. The camera at the penthouse door did not capture her further. On this floor, the video surveillance system is limited to common areas. After midnight, the apartment door was opened several times, but only a man was seen on camera. In the morning, he went down to the parking lot, got into a rented sedan, and drove away. He returned around noon and took the elevator with a shopping bag. Late in the evening, he left again. The recording shows 2 rolls of adhesive tape in a bag. During the night, the fire alarm in the kitchen was activated, a brief false alarm, which can be caused by steam when boiling water. This coincided with the timestamps when the extractor fan was running in his apartment, and water consumption in the bathroom increased. Such minor coincidences often become essential because they are difficult to fake after the fact. Engineering system logs are kept by the management company and stored automatically. On the same day, the investigation clarified with the Emirates Prosecutor's Office the procedure for obtaining a search warrant for the premises where the suspect had previously lived. The warrant was obtained for 2 addresses, an apartment hotel in Marina and a studio in the downtown area. A search of the apartment hotel yielded several empty mobile phone boxes, receipts for prepaid communication services, and a business card from a mobile phone store. The store confirmed that the man had repeatedly purchased starter packs, choosing plans with large data allowances, activating numbers for short periods, and changing them. He presented the same passport each time. A copy of the main page of the document remained on the internal reporting papers. Formally, this provided another source for comparing the photo and personal data with what appeared in other jurisdictions. Kazakhstan's law enforcement agencies, having established official communication with their colleagues in Dubai, sent their representatives to the emirate. They brought back materials from investigations into Arujan Temirova's contacts within the country, who had been in touch with her in recent weeks, which agency accounts had written to her, and whether there had been attempts to recruit other girls using a similar scenario. Several young women confirmed that they had received letters from the agency with the exact phrases, stating that flight and accommodation would be provided, that the first shoot would take place in the region, and that long-distance travel was possible. 2 girls refused after being asked to send a copy of their passports and bank card numbers, allegedly to secure their place. One of them provided correspondence in which the coordinator switched to a personal tone after a few days, suggesting a meeting outside of the casting to discuss personal terms. These examples helped show that the scheme was aimed not only at making professional promises, but also at establishing individual contact bordering on personal relationships. For Arujan Temirova's case, this was crucial. Her correspondence followed the same pattern. The forensic medical examination continued. Experts provided more precise information on the time of death, between late evening on June 15th and early morning on June 16th. No traces of sedatives were found in her blood. The absence of the heart was recorded as a post-mortem intervention. Experts noted that the organ had been removed roughly, with a violation of anatomical planes and no signs of surgical technique. This ruled out hypotheses related to medical removal of the organ for transplantation and pointed to versions involving the concealment of violent traces in the chest area or an attempt at staging. The wounds on the forearms, in terms of shape and location, were consistent with defensive wounds. There were traces of pressure from binding materials on the wrists. All these signs pointed to violent actions with active resistance from the victim. It was challenging to determine whether the removal of the organ was an act of intimidation, passion, or a deliberate attempt to mislead the investigation. It is important to note for the report that the investigators avoided making value judgments, recording only what could be proven. At the same time, work was carried out with suppliers of consumables. A sticker on the construction bags led to 2 retail chains. One of them found a purchase made on the same day that the man came to Business Bay with his payment card. The salesperson remembered the customer. He asked if the bags could hold a lot of weight, requested stronger tape, and bought gloves and large garbage bags. This witness identified the man from the camera footage provided by the police. The salesperson gave a detailed statement about the time, quantity, and packaging. Based on this information, investigators refined the route, adding another stop at the shopping center parking lot. Cameras showed the man driving up to the underground entrance, parking closer to the elevator, and returning with a cart loaded with boxes and bags. The elevator took him to the exit level of the residential complex via a passageway. It was a short route with no streets or extra cameras. During a second inspection of the apartment, focusing on microtraces, experts found microparticles matching the composition of the adhesive tape from the purchased kit. Miniature fragments of plastic film were found on the kitchen table, squeezed under the edge of the tabletop. Under the lens, it was clear that the film had been cut with a knife, and the edges of the cut matched the pattern of the packaging material used to wrap the bags. These coincidences were not dramatic tricks for the viewer, but for the judge and jury. Such consistent, simple, everyday details that link a place and actions in time are important. During the same period, the investigation clarified the suspect's escape route. Requests for CCTV footage along the highways revealed a white car that he left the penthouse parking lot in on the morning of June 18th. The vehicle belonged to another rental company and was registered to a person with a foreign passport. The end of the route remained unclear. The car disappeared from view after the junction where the road branches off toward the northern border of the emirate. It took several days to check toll booths and cameras in neighboring emirates. At the same time, flight departures were checked. Within 2 days after leaving the penthouse, no passenger with his name and date of birth left the country. This meant that he either used someone else's documents, left by land, or was hiding inside the country. Contact was established with those who rented cars to him, assisted with rentals, and made deliveries. The delivery service reported that he ordered cleaning kits, food for one, bottled water, and disposable towels. The couriers described him as polite, articulate, speaking English and sometimes Arabic. At the same time, the anti-trafficking department collected data on similar incidents in the region. In 2 neighboring countries, there were cases where young women received offers to be filmed, flew in, and then disappeared for several days, after which they got in touch and said that the filming did not take place, the agency disappeared, or their documents were being held. In one case, the victim said that a man who introduced himself as a coordinator demanded that she return the advance payment after she refused and threatened her with expenses. She left the country without filing a report. These stories rarely reach criminal court. The victims do not want publicity, fear the consequences, return home, and try not to remember. But they are important for the investigation as background information showing that such scenarios exist. Meanwhile, the funeral continued in Kazakhstan. Arujan Temirova's body was released after procedures and approvals. The family decided to hold the ceremony without the press. Local journalists, however, covered the story, talking to law enforcement officials, psychologists, and activists who help victims of human trafficking and deception under the guise of work abroad. They emphasized simple recommendations. Check the legal registration of agencies. Do not hand over original documents. Do not move in on power of attorney without the girl herself being present. And do not agree to go look at locations without a third party. This advice sounds obvious, but in reality, the prospects quickly changed the assessment of risks. In the case of Arujan Temirova, the decisive factor was that the initial contact was accompanied by payment and an outward display of care. Being locked inside a private apartment with no witnesses was the step that deprived her of any opportunity to escape the situation. In Dubai, the investigation reached the stage of issuing an international notification. This required not only logs and footage, but also formal procedural documents, a decision to bring charges against the suspect with a description of the facts, the prosecutor's approval, expert reports, inspection reports, and witness statements. These documents were translated into the necessary languages, certified, and prepared for dispatch through international channels. At the same time, the Emirates Legal Service consulted with external partners on how to formulate the charges more effectively, so that the notifications would be accepted without delay. In such cases, the wording of human trafficking, murder, and concealment of evidence often overlaps, and it is important that no jurisdiction refuses to cooperate due to differences in terminology. Another aspect worth noting is the inspection of medical facilities. The removal of the heart led the public to speculate about organs. The investigation checked clinics, pathology departments, and private medical centers for unrecorded operations, unusual requests, and missing materials. Nothing indicating a medical purpose for the removal was found. This conclusion was stated cautiously at a briefing. Experts reiterated that the manner of the intervention was crude, unprofessional, and showed no signs of preparation for transplantation. Consequently, the removal was not related to medicine. This cautious wording cooled the flow of speculation, which was heading toward sensational headlines. This was important for the family and fellow models. When unproven versions of events spread, attention shifts from the real story to the noise. Witnesses from the circle of the man with the Jordanian passport gave consistent descriptions. At the co-working space, he was known as a man who sometimes came in, sat at his laptop, rarely talked to anyone, and ordered coffee. At the yacht club, he appeared briefly, went into the restaurant, and did not linger on the pier. Security guards at his apartment in Marina recorded him arriving with female guests, but without any violations of public order. None of the employees noticed any conflicts. This is a typical disguise: outward correctness, observance of formal rules, no obvious reasons for attention. The internal security services of such complexes are focused on quickly suppressing noise and danger to other residents, rather than on recognizing hidden criminal schemes. During one of the repeated inspections of the penthouse, experts decided to remove the drain grate in the shower completely, dismantle the plastic siphon, and wash it with solutions under supervision. The mesh retained several microparticles, including a fragment of bright red nail polish. A comparison with photos from Arujan Tamirova's social media profile showed a match with the shade of nail polish she had used before her trip. Laboratory analysis confirmed the chemical composition and presence of skin particles. Microevidence of this kind rarely becomes a central sensation, but in court, where it is important to show a continuous thread, it works. The man's phone, which had been used in the last few days, could not be found. However, the remains of packaging from a smartphone purchased shortly before the events were found in the apartment. Through the seller, it was discovered that the device had been activated with a prepaid SIM card and that the number had been online for about 2 days. Most of the trips, purchases, and correspondence with the agent email account took place during those 2 days. This reinforced the understanding that he had prepared a clean set of communication tools for a specific episode. In other cases, he acted similarly. According to the mobile phone store, 6 months earlier, the man had purchased 2 more phones for the same purpose. One of them was activated during the period when one of the girls who had received an invitation was absent from the region, but later returned home without filing a report. Formally, this coincidence in itself proved nothing, but it showed a recurring pattern. The investigation turned to the digital portrait of the agency. The website hosting was purchased for several weeks. The domain went on vacation, as the provider's technician put it, and after a while reappeared, but with different content and a different name. The admin panel was accessed through an anonymization network, and the log files were not saved. However, the administrator made a mistake once and logged in without disguising himself. The IP address pointed to a hotel in the city, where a man with a Jordanian passport was staying at the time. The hotel billing confirmed the date and room number. This was an indirect but essential link between the offline character and the online infrastructure of the scheme. At this stage, Arujan Temirova's family was granted official access to the materials only insofar as they concerned the procedures and status of the case. At a meeting at the consulate, they were told that publishing the suspect's name before a warrant was issued could violate international rules of cooperation. The parents agreed to wait for the formal stage, although they asked that things be called by their proper names. They were promised that they would be the first to know as soon as an official notification was issued. By this point, another map had appeared on the wall of the headquarters. It marked the cities where the man had been in recent years, according to flight records and hotel reservations, the capital of a neighboring country, a significant financial center in the region, a coastal resort, and a European city with an active short-term rental market. In 2 of these locations, the police had received reports of foreign women going missing for short periods, but in both cases, the women returned and withdrew their claims. These cases were reopened to check whether the same method of communication, the same domain, and the exact phrases about personal conditions had been used. In one case, a template letter was found that matched the letters received by Arujan. This was enough to include the episode in the analytical note as a possible link. Working with the money brought new details to light. The account from which the penthouse was rented was replenished with numerous small transfers. One of the transfers came from a company registered to a person previously mentioned in the investigation into the recruitment of women as hostesses. The company's legal address was a virtual office. The phones did not answer. Through the payment provider, it was discovered that the account had been opened on the basis of a scanned passport with signs of forgery. The provider froze several related wallets. This did not provide a direct answer to the question of who killed her, but it did reveal the infrastructure. Around the real person with a Jordanian passport were fake accounts, virtual cards, disposable SIM cards, and domains that were launched for a short period and then disappeared. The investigation then returned to the human factor. Everyone who had seen Arujan Temirova in the city in the last few days was questioned. The barista from the coffee shop, the security guard in the lobby, the apartment manager, and the couriers. Their statements painted a calm picture. The girl was smiling, polite, calm, non-confrontational, and the man beside her was confident, paid, and gave directions. No arguments, no loud scenes. This picture leaves no obvious red flags for those around them. It is important to understand this. Many people expect a tragedy to be accompanied by clear signs before it happens. In reality, everything here was organized so that no one would be alarmed. At the same time, an examination of the contents of the container and the surrounding area was carried out. Traces of blood matching Arujan Temirova's profile were found on the walls inside the container. Microparticles from the soles of sneakers were found on the lid and side edge. Based on the tread pattern, experts attributed them to one of the models of a mass-market brand. A box containing sneakers of the same model was found in the apartment, along with a receipt dated 1 week before the events. A tread pattern matching the sneakers was found on the mat at the entrance to the penthouse. This evidence completed the chain of evidence. The shoes were purchased, used, and the traces matched. By the middle of the 3rd week after the body was found, the case materials were ready for the Emirates Prosecutor's Office to approve the issuance of an international search notice. The approval took some time. It was necessary to describe the incident with legal precision without violating jurisdictional rules or jeopardizing the future trial. The notice included his description, citizenship, year of birth, possible places of residence, connections in the region, payment methods, habits of changing phones and domains, cars he preferred to rent, and cities where he often appeared. This is particularly important for colleagues from other countries, as many arrests occur routinely during everyday activities like renting a place, checking into a hotel, or buying a SIM card. At the same time, in Kazakhstan and the Central Asian diaspora in the region, Civil society organizations formed a working group. They offered free contract reviews and advice for women planning to work abroad. It wasn't just models who came to the meetings. Dancers, waitresses, hostesses, and massage therapists also showed up. They brought correspondence and asked what to do if they had already bought tickets, if everything had been agreed upon long ago, or if the person seemed very trustworthy. In the context of this story, their questions sounded different. The answers were straightforward. Check the domain ownership, the license, and the addresses. Verify the name. Avoid moving into private apartments without a contract. And keep copies of documents with relatives. This cannot be called moralizing. These are simple procedures that can reduce risk in everyday life. The investigation avoided making any loud statements at this stage. The Dubai police follow standard practice. Do not disclose anything unnecessary until a person is officially wanted or detained. At the same time, it was obvious to us in the editorial office that further developments would follow the path of international cooperation. The man with the Jordanian passport could have tried to leave the region via land, could have hidden with acquaintances, could have changed his appearance. But a string of routine clues, tape, bags, a knife, packaging, sneakers, receipts, and logs were already forming a tight circle around him. Another detail came to our attention that seemed significant. During one of their first meetings, the man gave Arujan Temirova a bouquet of flowers. In a vase in the kitchen of the penthouse where the search was conducted, investigators found a single wilted bud with remnants of bright tape. The flower shop, which the investigators contacted via CCTV, confirmed that the man had bought the bouquet on the day of the meeting. The salesperson recalled that he had asked for specific greenery and for the ribbon to be festive, but not garish. The payment was made at the cash register using the same virtual card. This is not a crime or evidence that makes the front pages, but it is an element of everyday scenography that masked the planned actions as a romantic story. In such stories, it is not the symbols that are important, but the coincidences, the gift, the restaurant, the personal conditions, the transition to a private space. When we talk about such cases, the question inevitably arises as to why the victims do not demand tougher guarantees, why they do not hire professional managers, why they do not activate protective mechanisms. The answer is simple. Industries with low barriers to entry are always full of promises. In a situation where time is limited and the chance seems real, many agree to conditions that they would reject upon calm consideration. In the story of Arujan Temirova, the love affair factor is not speculation or journalistic embellishment. It is a working tool of control, praise, support, special attention stretched out over several days, and a chain of natural steps. A meeting, dinner, an offer to see the location, a move to a penthouse. The scenario is simple and therefore effective. At this stage, the man's name had not yet been made public, but the investigation files contained other cases in which he appeared as a person accused of human trafficking. Back then, several years ago, the trial did not end with a verdict. The defendant was released on bail and disappeared. Now the investigation was gathering threads to close the circle and bring formal charges based on mundane, unremarkable, but indisputable details. We knew that the next stage would be the publication of an international notice and attempts to find him where he would live as inconspicuously as he had before, in apart hotels, co-working spaces, parking lots near 24-hour stores, among domain panels and disposable SIM cards. The international notice was published at the end of the third week after the body was found. The text was restrained. It listed his distinguishing features, citizenship, year of birth, possible routes of travel, and his habit of using short-term rentals, disposable SIM cards, and virtual payment methods. The notice was sent through international cooperation channels to several regions where the suspect was known from migration data and bank records. A few days later, The border service of one of the countries in the region sent an official report to Dubai. A Jordanian citizen had been detained at the capital's airport during arrival checks. His year of birth matched, his photo was similar, his flight movements fit the pattern, and his passport showed signs of a page replacement with a mark indicating his last visa. The procedure then followed routine. He was informed of his detention, the Emirates prosecutor's office was notified, and the mechanism for requesting his temporary arrest and subsequent extradition was set in motion. Coordination took place between the justice ministries of the two countries, and packages of documents confirming the grounds for the transfer were exchanged. While the formalities were being completed, the local authorities placed the detainee in solitary confinement. The first brief interview was recorded for the record. He denied any involvement and gave vague answers to questions about his stay in Dubai, referring to business meetings and short visits. His lawyer asked that he not be questioned until he had received the case file. The extradition request was granted. The flight to Dubai was arranged without publicity. At the airport, he was met by police officers from the Emirate and the prosecutor's office. He was informed of his rights and told that he was suspected of murder, concealment of evidence, and using fictitious activities for recruitment. At this stage, the names were officially announced. The man's name was Raed Issam al-Karak, 46, a Jordanian citizen. His file contained several cases that had not been brought to trial involving the involvement of women in prostitution in a neighboring country. At that time, he was released on bail and left the jurisdiction. Now he had to answer in Dubai. The first interrogations were conducted without pressure or spectacle. The investigator laid out printed camera footage, showed receipts, excerpts from the building's engineering logs, and expert reports on microparticles. A map of the city with marked routes lay on the table to prevent his interlocutor from speaking in general terms and steering the conversation toward assessments. Raed al-Karak remained calm and denied any direct involvement. He admitted to knowing the girl, said that he had indeed seen her in a cafe, that he had helped her with accommodation, and that he had discussed the terms of the shoot. He said that they later had a falling out and stopped communicating. He denied that she had been to the penthouse, denied delivering supplies, and denied traveling to the industrial zone. When reminded of a partial thumbprint on the inside of the adhesive tape, he replied that he had never bought such tape and did not understand how his print could have ended up there. Regarding the footage from the hardware store where his face was captured, he said that it was not him and that anyone could wear a similar cap. When asked about the router in the apartment, where a device matching the signature of Arujan Temirova's phone appeared between late evening on June 15th and early morning on June 16th, he replied that he did not know who could have brought such a phone. After the interrogations, the stage of presenting charges and preparing for trial began. The Emirates prosecutor's office formed a case consisting of several episodes: murder with particular cruelty, attempted concealment of evidence, and misleading information about the nature of the work and conditions of stay. The legal wording in this jurisdiction is restrained and based on specific facts. The indictment did not contain any journalistic generalizations. The facts were listed point by point: the date of Arujan Temirova's arrival, her check-in at the apartment, meetings, her move to the penthouse, the disconnection of communications, the purchase of consumables, the discovery of the body, evidence in the apartment, evidence in the container, receipts and logs, comparison of samples, testimony from sellers, camera recordings, and car rental data. The results of the forensic medical examination were presented in a separate section: time of death between late evening on June 15th and early morning on June 16th, multiple stab wounds, defensive injuries, signs of binding on the wrists, post-mortem removal of the heart, performed roughly, without signs of surgical technique. The trial was held without public broadcasts. At the first hearing, the defendant's lawyer stated that the case was based on circumstantial evidence. He requested that some of the evidence be excluded, pointing to procedural violations during the seizure of certain items from the apartment. The court examined the defense's arguments and left the evidence in the case file. The searches were authorized, the inspections were recorded, and the chain of custody of the evidence was maintained. The lawyer attempted to shift the focus to a third person who could have entered the penthouse and committed the crime without the owner's knowledge. The prosecution responded that during the time when this could have happened, the elevator and corridor logs recorded only one person with an access card, Raed al-Karaka. The camera on the floor did not show any strangers, and none of the neighbors entered the apartment. In addition, the router log shows that Arajan Temirova's device was present in the apartment only once, during a period that coincided with increased water and electricity consumption and recorded activity in the bathroom and kitchen. The court accepted these explanations. The court then heard expert testimony. A forensic expert explained why a partial fingerprint was sufficient for comparison. A number of key features matched the sample taken from the rental company's tablet when the car was rented in the name of Raed al-Karaka. A representative of the store confirmed that a customer wearing a black cap and t-shirt had purchased the same tape, bags, knife, and gloves on the evening of June 15th, paying with a virtual card linked to the same payment service used to pay for the penthouse and the car. A microparticle expert showed a diagram of the matches. Microfragments of plastic film on the tabletop in the penthouse match the structure of the film used to wrap the bags found in the container. The edges of the tape cut from the purchased roll match the glue residue on the inner surface of the bags. Particles of bright red nail polish and skin cells genetically matching the profile of Arajan Temirova were found on the shower drain. A footprint from a mass-market brand of sneakers was found on the mat at the entrance. A box for this model with a receipt was found in the apartment, and the tread pattern matches the microparticles on the edge of the container. Traces of biological fluids matching Arajan Temirova's blood were found on the inside panel of the trunk of the rented sedan. Chemical analysis showed that the substance had been recently treated with agents designed to remove such traces. The court also heard from digital forensics experts. They described the routes confirmed by cameras and parking logs, compared the time of departure from the penthouse, arrival at the shopping center, purchase of materials, return, nighttime activity, and then nighttime departure toward the industrial zone. A separate episode concerned the domain of a fictitious agency. The hosting technician confirmed that the administrator had logged in once without masking, and the IP address led to the hotel where Raed al-Karak was staying at the time. The hotel bill with the room number matched the date. This was not central evidence of the murder, but it showed a link between the online recruitment infrastructure and the defendant's offline presence in the city. The defense tried to dispute the conclusions of the forensic medical examination. The lawyer asked whether the post-mortem intervention could have been the work of another person who arrived after the conflict, when the defendant was no longer there. The expert replied that the time frame did not support this hypothesis. The activity of the engineering systems and logs in the house coincided with the defendant's movements. Other access cards did not work during this period, and no other persons were seen. The court recorded this answer in the minutes. The court then gave the floor to the victim's family. The parents spoke briefly. The mother requested that no assessments be added to the story, that terms be used by their proper names, and that a decision be made to demonstrate that such schemes can be prevented. The father thanked the investigation and the consulate for not having to search for documents and evidence himself. The parents' words did not affect the legal side, but were recorded as part of the open part of the trial. During the debate, the prosecution systematically repeated the chain of events: a fictitious agency as a means of entry, the transfer of business communication to a personal level, control of logistics and movements, isolation in a private penthouse, sudden disconnection of communications, purchase of materials, nighttime activity in the apartment, transportation of bags, an attempt to hide on a container line in an industrial zone, escape in rented cars, changing phone numbers, an attempt to hide in a neighboring country, and arrest on an international warrant. A separate issue was the posthumous removal of the heart. The prosecution asked not to add speculation to this fact and to exclude versions related to medical purposes. The expert opinion directly pointed to grossly unprofessional interference. The prosecution suggested that the removal served either to intimidate, to mislead the investigation, or was an expression of control over the victim's body after the murder. The court did not make any psychological assessments and left this issue as an established fact without interpretation. The defense requested that the court consider the absence of direct witnesses to the murder, the insufficiency of circumstantial evidence, procedural flaws, and the fact that some materials were obtained from cloud copies, which, according to the defense, were accessed improperly. The court checked the access chains. Wherever the content of cloud backups was mentioned, warrants and sanctions were obtained. Representatives of the providers confirmed the validity of the procedures, and the file integrity hashes matched. The court rejected the motions to exclude evidence. The verdict was announced in a closed courtroom without cameras. The court found Raed Issam al-Karaka guilty on all counts. The reasoning stated that the totality of the evidence formed a continuous and consistent chain that excluded reasonable doubt as to the defendant's involvement. The court separately pointed out the preparatory nature of the actions, the creation of a fictitious agency structure, domain infrastructure, pre-purchased means of communication, deliberate transfer of communication to a personal level, establishment of control through promises and attentive treatment, choice of private space for isolation, purchase of consumables, and attempts to cover up traces. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment. Separately, the court found him guilty of creating conditions conducive to the recruitment of women under the guise of modeling work and imposed an additional sentence. Property related to the financing of the scheme is subject to confiscation within the limits established by law. In the operative part, the court ordered the competent authorities to forward the materials to countries where human trafficking cases had previously been left unresolved, to use the decision to resume investigations into other incidents. The defendant and his lawyer filed an appeal. The appeal arguments repeated the arguments of the first instance regarding the indirect nature of the evidence and alleged procedural violations. The appellate court, after reviewing the evidence, left the verdict unchanged. The appeal court's ruling specifically noted that it was precisely the everyday evidence, receipts, packaging, elevator logs, engineering system records, microparticles, and camera footage that had high probative value, as it could not be fabricated retroactively without leaving a trace, and all of it corroborated each other in the case. After the final decision was announced, the reaction was businesslike and restrained. In Kazakhstan, the consular service issued a statement thanking its colleagues in Dubai for their cooperation and emphasizing the need to verify any offers of work abroad. Several modeling schools and agencies updated their internal protocols: mandatory verification of the legal registration of contractors, exclusion of the practice of settling in by power of attorney without the presence of the model herself, a requirement that the first meetings take place in public places with the presence of third parties, and recording of routes and times of meetings. Public organizations have offered a hotline for quick audits of inviting organizations. Short-term rental platforms in the Emirate have announced additional checks to prevent keys from being handed over to unauthorized persons based on copies of powers of attorney, without the physical presence of the guest. The management companies of several complexes have revised their regulations. Access to penthouses and apartments by power of attorney is now accompanied by additional verification. Engineering system logs are kept longer, and requests from law enforcement agencies are processed on an expedited basis. Delivery services have introduced a short checklist for couriers in case a guest needs help. The algorithm includes discreetly calling the reception and security without putting the customer at risk. The criminal case also includes technical recommendations that do not usually make it into the press, but are essential for prevention. Digital forensics recommended that hosting providers in the region increase the level of verification when registering domains for agencies and employment services, requiring confirmation of a legal address and license in advance before including the site in the index. Payment providers were notified of patterns of splitting payments and characteristic routing connections so that anti-fraud systems could flag such transactions as requiring verification. Car rental companies received recommendations to strengthen the identification of customers who often rent cars for short periods, regularly change models, and leave them in different parts of the city. These are not loud headlines, but quiet mechanisms that reduce the likelihood of recurrence. For the family of Arujan Temirova, this outcome was not a relief. But they now have the opportunity to talk about their daughter in the past tense without uncertainty. They asked that her name not be turned into a symbol and that no sensationalism be built around the story. Their position coincided with the approach of the court and the investigation, not to state more than has been proven, not to attribute motives that have not been established, and not to shift the focus to matters unrelated to the case. The final documents show a precise sequence of events: an offer from a fictitious agency, the establishment of personal contact and dependent trust, isolation, murder, an attempt to cover it up, escape, arrest, trial, and sentencing. In practical terms, this material shows what a real scheme looks like, in which a love affair is not a romantic plot, but a tool. The sequence of compliments, gifts, personal conditions, and promises, repeated enough times to lower critical perception, turns out to be part of a technological chain built with the same cold routine as buying tape, bags, gloves, renting a car, and driving out at night to the container line. Where the public imagination seeks an unusual explanation, the investigation records simple things that, when added together, give an irrefutable result. A person with a specific name organized and carried out a crime, using a combination of a fictitious business role and personal influence. The court established this with a sufficient degree of certainty and imposed the maximum sentence for such offenses in this jurisdiction. The name Raed Issam al-Karaka is now on the wanted lists of countries where there were previously unresolved cases involving the recruitment of women. His contacts and correspondence templates have been distributed through the relevant channels. Where cases have been suspended due to the absence of a suspect, they are being reopened to check whether the dates and domains overlap. This paperwork rarely makes it into public reports, but it is precisely this that creates a horizontal network that deprives such schemes of their primary resource: mobility between jurisdictions.